All right, I've begun the recording, so we will start the session. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second Tidal Tips and Techniques webinar. So, backed by popular demand. Thank you for the many requests to bring this this forum and this discussion back. So, today we have Eric Smith, who will be leading the discussion with us. Today's agenda, Eric, if you want to go to the next slide. So Eric will go through in detail the different types of actions and events that are available. He'll look at the file events and file dependencies and discuss when it's best to use each of them. We'll dive into complex dependencies and we'll pull up the product for some live demos. And then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So to housekeeping and the Q&A, all participants are going to be in listen-only mode. As I mentioned, we are recording this session and we'll post it on the customer portal. It should be there by early next week. And then, we want this to be a real interactive session as well. So, we will have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you've got questions, submit them on the WebEx Q&A panel on the right side of your screen, and we'll get to as many of them as possible at the end. So with that, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, Rick, thank you. I appreciate that introduction. So good morning, all. Again, I want to thank everybody for showing up this morning. My name is Eric Smith, and I've been supporting the application for about 11 years now. I'm sure I've probably talked to quite a few of you in my time here. So today we're going to be talking about a few areas that's probably going to be relatively familiar for the majority of you. However, after a few conversations that I've had recently, we do have some new customers that I think that might benefit from this review. So we're going to be talking about, as Rick had mentioned, events, actions, and dependencies. And I also thought, too, that since we do have some new features added, that even perhaps some veteran operators and developers might benefit from this as well. So without further delay, let's go ahead and get started. So first off, we're going to talk about events. So what is an event? An event is either an internal or an external condition that can occur either at the job level, the system level, or a file level. Think of it as cause and effect. So if the event is the cause, then an action is the effect. So we have multiple options for events. An event can either be internal, such as a job event, meaning something that actually happens at the job level, or a system event, something that happens at the TA system level. Or it can be external, such as a file event or an adapter event, such as SQL, SAP, Servicenow. Events are monitored and triggered by the master, and they have an associated action that will execute once the event is triggered. Certain types of events can actually run on a schedule according to a calendar and a time frame, and this will help prevent with utilization of resources. And we do offer support for multiple event types as well as multiple event triggers. So what exactly do we mean by that? What do we mean by multiple event types and multiple event triggers? So as far as the multiple event types go, we actually have several different options. Some of the more common ones being used are job events, system events or system level events, and then file events and adapter events. A job level event may be a job executing and completing with a particular status, or a job's going to run late, or perhaps it's going to get skipped, or it may even be running longer than its estimated duration has shown. A system level event is going to be something along the lines of the master being paused or resumed, or any type of information regarding the compile for the night. Maybe the compile failed or the compile completed, or even something like the master getting paused, or the queue. You can actually set up system level events for queue notifications, or perhaps an agent has lost the ability to talk to the master. You can set up system level events for all of those. A file level event is the monitoring of a particular directory by an agent for the arrival of a file. And then an adapter event, basically they have multiple options that's going to differ based off the type of the adapter being utilized. So let me go ahead and give you guys a quick little demonstration of this. So just as a quick heads up, most of the demonstrations that you're going to see today are just going to be very simplistic. I just wanted to keep it pretty simple in terms of the complexity. So let me go ahead and pull up my job completed abnormally job event. All right, so this is my sample job event definition. A job event is going to be associated to either a particular job or job group. If you actually click on the Associated Jobs tab, you can see the list of jobs that are associated with that particular job event. You can also add and remove job events from job definitions from this screen as well. You don't necessarily have to go and hunt and peck in your actual job definition screen in order to find the job. You can actually do it directly from here. So there's a couple of different options that you can utilize for finding the job. You can use the drop down and scroll through. Obviously, if you don't have that many jobs in your schedule, probably a little easier to use this. But if you'd like to get a little bit more granular with your search, you can click the ellipses out to the right, and then we give you a job search option. You can specify job ID, name, owner, agent, class, and then you can specify whether or not you want the group level, the jobs, or whether or not the job is enabled or even disabled. So those are all options that you can actually have. So just as a quick demonstration, these fields do accept wildcards. So I think I have a job maybe called that has the word variable in it. Not sure. Let's see if I can actually find anything. Great. So I actually used a wildcard variable and another wildcard, and I can see here that I have one job sleep variable example that I can assign to this particular job event from the screen. We also offer advanced criteria. Maybe you know something about the actual command or an agent list or what the parent group is. You can select those as far as search criteria is concerned as well. There's a couple other options that you can utilize as far as applying the event to jobs. You'll notice here that we actually have all jobs and groups, all jobs only excluding groups, and all groups only excluding jobs. So it's pretty self-explanatory. You're either going to apply that event to all jobs and groups, all jobs only excluding groups, or vice versa. A quick word of caution here using these, though, and this actually comes from a real-world scenario that I encountered myself some time ago. If you're going to use something like all jobs and groups, I would make sure that the event trigger is going to be something that's not going to be very common, i.e. completed normally. We had a scenario where we had a job completed normally event trigger set to an email notification, and they had accidentally selected the all jobs and groups. So every time that a job completed normally in their schedule, an email notification was getting sent. So they had a couple unhappy users. So just a word of caution when utilizing something like that. So the event is going to execute based off of the event of the defined event trigger, and then it's going to fire the associated action. So I mentioned a couple earlier, but if you select your event trigger dropdown, you can see that we have basically most types of statuses for the job event that you can assign. So, the agent has gone inactive, the job is active, the job completed abnormally, deferred, it's gone into a particular status. Maybe the launch window is not going to be available, or it's not going to meet it's not going to have enough time to run. You can set up notifications based off of all of these. In regards to the associated action, for job events, we actually have a couple of predefined ones that come out of the box, or you can customize your own actions based off the needs of your organization. So how's this going to work? So the event will get assigned to that particular job or job group, and whenever that event's going to get triggered, it's going to execute the action. So in this scenario, we're saying that once the job completes abnormally, go ahead and activate the associated actions specified over here on the left-hand side. So for this scenario, we have a customized action that we created called, this is an email notification, as you can see over here by the icon on the left-hand side. It's notification of job completed abnormally. We have an alert that's going to be generated, and we also have a Servicenow or a Snow incident create option that we will execute once the job is completed abnormally and it fires the event trigger. What some people might not know is instead of actually having to close this out and go to your actions to get details on each one of these, you can actually double-click the selected action here, and you can see the summary of that particular action. So this is our email notification. We can see that it's going to send an alert with a message to a particular user. We can see here that we have a alert definition, a warning notification utilizing variables. And then our final one that we have here is a Servicenow incident create. This is using a Snow adapter to ping the incident table and then it's going to create values or create an incident based off of the values that we're going to pass along. I'll go ahead and give a demonstration of that here in a second. And then the other two tabs, description, if you wanted a brief description of what this particular job event pertains to. I usually try to make mine pretty evidently clear when I create it in my event name. And then trigger history. This is just basically a history of that particular job event that's fired. This is based off of the information that you have set up in the trigger history retention value for your system configuration. So if we go into the system config, it's right here, trigger history retention in days. That's going to execute and save data for 30 days. Anything beyond that will actually automatically get purged during the automatic history purge at the roll of day. So let's go ahead and demonstrate how this is going to work. So I'm going to go ahead here to my jobs. All right. So I've got a sleep job completed abnormally. So in this particular scenario, like I said, most of these are going to be very simplistic. So it's a sleep job. It's going to execute for 15 seconds. If I click on my job events, you can see here that my job event is assigned. And again, you can come through here and see all the details of what's going to trigger the job event and then the associated actions for it. If we did have any of those options in regards to all jobs and groups, all groups excluding jobs, or all jobs excluding groups, then they would actually show up down here in this window, job events that apply to all jobs. But as we don't have anything assigned to that, that's why this is blank. So this particular job is going to complete abnormally. Now I've done that by coming in here to the exit code. The exit code is normally going to be 0 and 0. However, in this case, I've set it to 1 and 1, so the job will complete abnormally once I enter it into the schedule. All right, so let me go ahead and insert this guy. Kind of copy that for ease. And I'll come back over here to my activity. All right, so the job has entered into the schedule. It's waiting on the resource. Should go active. All right, and we'll wait for the 15 seconds. And then once this job completes, it'll go into a completed abnormal status, and then we'll check each one of our particular events. Okay, so the sleep job has completed abnormally. And if we go to our event activity, we can see here that our job completed abnormal event trigger has incremented by 1. If we double click on this particular event, we can see that there is a trigger history for today, as well as the overall trigger history. And we can also see the status of the particular job event. Current status is active, times triggered since the beginning of the production day, and then the last trigger condition time. Now, if we actually had a schedule associated with this, like I mentioned, some job event or some events can actually run on a schedule. If it's not within that time window, then this would actually, the current status would actually be in a timed out situation. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at all of our particular actions that were associated with this. So the first thing that we actually had was an email notification. So I'm going to come here. This is the email notification that I received. Alert, job ID 7685 has completed with the status of completed abnormally. We'll talk a little bit about this later, but again, these are all variables that it's pulling automatically from the job. So it knows what the job run ID is. It knows that it completed abnormally based off of the variables that are assigned to that particular email notification. And we also created an alert. So we can look here, again, job number 7685, sleep job completed abnormally. We can go ahead and acknowledge and close this alert if we'd like. And then the final part of it was a Servicenow incident case being opened. Let me go ahead and log back in here. And we'll do a refresh of our screen. And we can see that we automatically created a Servicenow incident report, or incident case, I should say. We've passed along variables, sleep job completed abnormally, 7685 is in state completed abnormally. All right. So that's basically how the job event will work. Now we've actually got a couple other sample job events that I set up. We have ones for a job agent when inactive. In this particular case, we're saying the job is the agent for the particular job wasn't available, so or it went into an inactive state, we have an option set here to insert a job. We have a job completed normally action. This is saying that when the event trigger it completes normally, that it's going to send an email notification. And I've also got this one set up to execute a rerun. So the rerun, we actually talked a little bit about this in our previous webinar. So I highly encourage anybody that's interested in running this particular option to go and take a look at that. But just a quick overview of it. Basically, once the trigger condition is met, then it's going to, in this particular case, it's going to go to, the job will complete normally, but then it's going to execute a rerun with a 5-minute delay. So that might be, it may be beneficial in a case where maybe there's a file that's supposed to be available that isn't available within the time frame. The job completes, with an error condition. You want that job to run. You know that file is going to be available within another 5 minutes. You can just automatically set up a rerun with a time window so that it'll execute on the next instance. So, like I said, we've got a couple of different options. Another option here is a variable that I wanted to show off. You can assign variables, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But you can assign variables to jobs, and then if you need to override a particular variable, you can have a variable action. For instance, like let's say in my example, I have a sleep job that runs for 30 seconds, but upon the rerun of the job, I want the variable to be updated to say something like 15 seconds. You can use a variable action to define how long that job is going to run and replace that variable action, or replace the variable data that's in there with the criteria from your variable action. I know it's a little bit of a complex idea to talk about, but I'll give you another demonstration about that here shortly. So moving on, now that we've covered the basics for job events, I do want to go over some other types of events that we have, and the next one is system events. So system events are monitored by the master for system level activity. And that's going to be anything along the lines of a change to the master status or an agent or adapter, or perhaps a status update on the nightly compile, or even the monitoring of queue levels, right? So I actually had a couple set up here. In this particular scenario, I was looking for the confirmation that my nightly compile has completed. So you can see here that the compile is finished. I've got an email notification requesting an update that the compile did indeed complete without any sort of issues. Here's the email example that we have. The compile successfully completed for my master on this particular date. And I also have a couple of other ones that I've set up. So I have a notification if someone goes in and pauses my master. That's kind of a bad thing. We want to be notified when something like that happens, right? So we have an alert being set up for this. And then we also have one for resumed as well. So we can actually demonstrate this. We'll come up here and we'll go ahead and pause our scheduler. Should see a little notification pop up here in our window. All right, so we see here that our master is paused. We'll check our trigger history, and there is our trigger from just now. And then if we go into our alert notification, oh no, we've got an alert notification saying that our master has been paused. Please check the connection and confirm. All right, so I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to resume my scheduler. And then what this is going to do is this is going to go ahead and you can see that the master is now unpaused. If we check our master resumed activity or our system level event, we can see the trigger history here is now executed. And again, if we go back into our alert notification that we have assigned to that particular job event, master has been resumed. Thank you for the prompt attention to this master. All right, so that's basically a system level event. And like I said, you can set up a system level event for anything that may impact jobs or your master. And so that's anything like like I said, if the master loses the availability to talk to an adapter or an agent, you can receive a notification on that or alert. If the master fails over to the backup master, if you're in a fault tolerant environment, you can receive notifications on those as well. So I would definitely consider going through each one of those system events and see what's important to you, because obviously these are things that could help you keep a gentle eye on your environment to ensure that you're ahead of the game if something were to happen. So another commonly used type of event is a file event. So a file event allows users to monitor a particular directory on a server utilizing an agent. And then you can execute an action based off of the arrival of that particular file. So again, just a very simple example that we have here. We're saying we're going to be utilizing a Windows agent, which I've got specified by agent name. We have a directory specified, C, users, Eric S, May webinar test. And then we have a test file with a wildcard option looking for a text file. So you can use a wildcard option if there are values in that naming convention that are changing dynamically. With this, you can also specify a couple of different criteria for the file event executing. Whenever the file arrives, the file event is automatically going to execute, unless you're actually looking for it to get to a particular size or maybe wait a certain amount of time before executing, which you can actually specify here. So for instance, if you know that the file drops in and maybe it drops in at 20 megs, but you need it to wait until it gets to 40 megs, you can actually specify that option here at the file event level. You can also specify the milliseconds before a millisecond delay before processing, so it just doesn't automatically execute as soon as that file drops in there. Again, these are all options to allow you to make sure that the file is there and complete before executing the file event. And then in this situation too, we also have a disposition for the file, meaning what is going to happen to that file once that file event has been satiated. So in this particular case, I'm going to move it to a target directory. The other option is, I believe you can delete the file from the source directory altogether. The cool thing too about file events in regards to maintaining some resource integrity is you can actually specify the schedule for this to happen. So maybe you don't want the agent to be constantly looking for a particular file to arrive in that directory when you know, hey, this file is only going to arrive on a Friday. You can actually come in here, assign a calendar to that particular file event, as well as a time window. So it's only going to be looking for that file during the time that you specified. Again, it's a great way to maintain your resources, making sure that the agent has everything that it needs in order to process jobs and job executions, and not get bogged down with looking for a particular file on a Tuesday when in reality it's only going to show up at 11 o'clock on a Friday morning. So again, we have an option here. This is something that's specific to file events, and I believe there's another option for it in some of the adapter events, is the trigger constraints. How many times do we actually want this particular event to fire? If you have 100 if you have 100 files being dropped into the folder that the agent's going to be monitoring, but you're only concerned with the first 5, you can actually specify, hey, only trigger this particular event 5 times. Don't worry about the other 95 files that drop into the directory. And you can also specify the amount of files that are going to get triggered in a certain time window. So if there's 100 files that get dropped into a directory within 10 minutes, but you're only concerned about the first 5, again, you can specify trigger constraints so that it's only going to trigger a maximum amount of times based off of what you need. Again, associated actions. We talked a little bit about this before, but we have a job that's going to be inserted into the schedule once this file event has been satiated. And then again, description and trigger history. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Go ahead and pull up my server here. All right, so I have a test file here, test file 051321, which we're going to drop into the test directory. All right, so at this point, the agent's working in the background. It's monitoring for this particular file to be made available in this directory. We can actually go back over to our trigger event. Give it a second here. Okay, and we can see now that the trigger has been executed. And if we go back to our server, now if you recall on the file monitor, I had it moving to a target directory. So let's check that directory. Okay, perfect. So our file is no longer in the root of the test directory. And if we check the completed directory, the file has been moved over for us. And if you recall, we had a insert job. And let's see, the job is sleep job insert action, which obviously I found out by double clicking on that particular action. So let me go back up and take a look at my job activity. And you can see that the sleep job insert action has completed normally. It was inserted via the action on the file event itself. Okay, so finally moving on, talking about our last type of job event, and that's going to be the adapters. So depending on the adapter event you're creating, it's really based off of the adapter options that you're licensed for. So obviously, if you've got an SAP adapter, if you have a MS SQL adapter or a JDBC connection, those are ones that are going to be able to make you're going to be able to make a job event or an adapter event for. Okay, so for my particular setup here, I just went the pretty simple route. I have an MS SQL event adapter event definition here. So basically what this is going to do, for this particular scenario at least, we're monitoring a particular database for any type of action. So in this case, it's, like I said, MS SQL is going to be different from JDBC, from Oracle, from Servicenow. Each type of adapter is going to have its own options as far as what you can utilize for it. So for this particular scenario, we're looking at a DB connection that I have set up to my SQL server, my 2019 SQL server, that's going to be looking for a row added to a particular table on my Admiral 657 database, utilizing my database user of Tidal, and it's going to be monitoring the job masked table. So most of you are probably aware, but the job masked table is where the job definitions are housed. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to say, okay, anytime a value is, anytime a new job definition is created, let me know. You can also do it for things such as indexes and tables as well. Anytime any one of those are created, deleted, or modified, you can set up a notification for it. So what does this look like? Well, let's take a look here. All right, so here is my job mass table that's being monitored. So if I execute this query, we can see that we have a total of 231 rows that shows up in my job mass table. So let's go back over here. And I am just going to add just a quick job. All right. We'll call it sample SQL job. And my favorite, sleep 15, and I'll say OK. All right, so we have a new job definition, and therefore we should have a new record in our job mass table. So let's bounce back over here. I'm going to run that query again. And you can see now we have 232 rows. So going back to my SQL event definition, we can take a look again at trigger history. 1028, there's our trigger. And for this particular one, I believe we had we have an alert and MS SQL table modification. So I'm going to take a look at my alert screen, and there's our notification letting us know that the table has been modified. And like I said, the adapters are all going to be different. So again, the SQL won't look, SQL will look like this, but your Oracle JDBC is going to look totally different. Servicenow is going to look totally different. It's really based off of what that adapter is capable of doing. So one thing that I did kind of breeze over that I wanted to kind of highlight again is going back to our job events. Is the new service level agreement events. These were introduced in 656. We actually did a really good presentation on this back in the March 2021 Winter Lodge webinar. And again, you can find that out on our customer portal. I highly recommend anybody that's interested in looking at SLAs and how to utilize them for their environment to go back and take a look at that. Fred did a really fantastic job explaining how those work. But basically, there are new options that have been added to the application, and as long as you have an SLA policy in place, these events are going to be capable of being utilized. And they're basically just ways that you can kind of provide quality and timely delivery and consistency that's agreed upon between you and the customers that you're servicing. So we have things, if you look at the event triggers for SLAs, we have a ton of new SLA options. So anything from, a job likely is to miss the breach window, the job may not complete by the end of the risk window. Any of those values that you have set up at the SLA notification level, you can set it up so that you'll receive a notification or an alert letting you know, hey, this job is at risk. We need to take a look at this. Again, these are all policies that are set up at the SLA level. All right, so moving on, let's talk a little bit about actions. So going back to my original analogy, if the event is the cause, then the action is going to be the effect. So I've already kind of shown off a couple examples of alerts and email notifications already. These are ones that I create specifically for these examples. There's also some default actions that I mentioned at the job event level that you can specify, such as rerun or set to a particular status or just canceling the job altogether. So I'll go through a couple of these. I'll keep it pretty brief. So for the first incident that we showed you, the job completing abnormally, that particular job event, I had a email notification set up for this. So as long as you've got the email part of the application that's set up under the system config, you should be able to utilize this. This is information that's all coming from the mail tab here. But if we open up our email notification, you can see that it's coming from myself, that in this particular case, it's going to me, and it's got a little subject matter. It's got a little message here. Also, if there was a file that was generated as far as output was concerned, I can send that as an attachment. And one thing that I do want to kind of point out is you can utilize variables in both of these options. A very 1,000-foot view of a variable is basically a quick way to, instead of me actually typing out job ID in every single email notification that gets sent out, what a variable is going to do is it's going to actually take a look at what that data references and pull it automatically into your email notification or your alert. Variables are listed down here. You can find the variables button on most every part of the application. There are variables that come with the application, such as system and job variables, and in this particular case, job run variables, meaning that when the job ran, it created its own set of variables, such as job status and job ID. You can also set up your own variables. As here you can see I have a May webinar variable, which is basically just a number value of 30. So instead of actually having to go in and say, hey, I want this job to run 30 seconds on, on 5 different jobs, I can utilize a variable and replace 30 with that variable. Now, the cool thing about that is, instead of having to go through and make a modification to 5 different jobs, if I want to change that variable from 30 to 45, if I'm using a variable, I just update the value at the variable level. I don't have to go into each particular job and say, okay, I want this job to go from 30 to 45, 30 to 45, 30 to 45. I can just update it in one place and it replicates it across the entire spectrum. So definitely look at your options for leveraging variables. It'll make keeping jobs in check that much easier. So we can see that I'm leveraging variables in this particular scenario. Talking just a real quick bit about email notifications. You can see here that there are, again, variables being used. For instance, who owns the action, who owns the job. If I wanted to send an email notification, instead of having to type in that particular user, the application is smart enough to know, okay, who owns that job? This job failed. Let me go and pull that information so I can attach them to this particular email notification. You can also set up, interactive users. As long as that interactive user has an email address associated with them, they can receive the notification as well. And then work groups. Work groups are the same thing. If a work group is the owner of a particular job, you can specify the work group to be, and that's going to include everybody that is a member of that work group. And then finally, other email addresses. Let's say that you have a CEO that is concerned about the output from one particular job, but you don't want him to have access to Tidal. Instead of adding him as a user, you can just specify his email address in the other email address field. That way, you don't have to set him up as having an account to access the application. You can just let him know, hey, this is the email it's going to be sent. It's going to be sent to you at this address. All right, so we have alert notifications. That was an email notification. We have an alert notification. Again, we've seen most of these examples already. They fall into 4 different criterias: critical error, warning, or information. And then you can also put in, any values here. An alert message, maybe these are instructions to the operator on what to do in the event that, a job fails. You need to call such and such, to let him know, hey, your job failed. How would you like me to proceed with this? You can put all that information listed here. Again, you can use variables in this particular field as well. Other types of actions, we have a job action. I think we actually saw this with the file event. So in this particular case, when the file event was triggered, it inserted job into the schedule. The job's name was sleep job insert action. As far as a job action is concerned, you can actually specify it to run with a different agent or a different RTU, different runtime user. So if it's set up to run, with a particular Windows agent and it fails, maybe we need to run it on a different agent. So you can specify, hey, let's go ahead and reinsert this job. We're going to run it this time with a different agent, and we're going to specify a different runtime user. You can also specify, overridden variables and parameters. My favorite is the simple sleep job. Let's say that my default value down here for my command parameter is 15 seconds, but on the job insert, I actually only want it to run for 10 seconds. I can specify that here at the override level, and when the job gets inserted into the schedule, instead of running for 15 seconds, it's going to run for 10 seconds. So we also offer a variety of support for a variety of different adapter actions, SNMP traps, business objects, SAP, ServiceNow. In one of my examples, I actually showed a ServiceNow action. I'll give you guys a quick demonstration of that. So if we open this up, basically it's going to be utilizing my TrainingsNow adapter. It's going to be looking at the incident table. And in this particular scenario, I was actually creating an incident in the incident table for my ServiceNow environment. You can also set it to update a pre-existing value that's already in the application. But it's actually kind of interesting because, again, variables come into play. So if we go back here, we can see that, the short description is, 7685 is in state completed abnormally. The description is sleep job completed abnormally. So the great thing is I don't have to type in 7685 is in state completed abnormally. What I can do is I can go to my short description field, and you'll notice here job ID is in state job status. So those variables, again, are coming into play that it's pulling that information automatically into the ServiceNow incident and creating it with those values that are getting carried over. And most of these fields are capable of being modified and carried over into ServiceNow. I think we actually have, I believe it was yes, here we go. So we can actually see that the description, again, utilizing a variable called job name, which automatically comes in here and populates the incident table with the name of the job that the incident is being created for. So that's pretty exciting. That's a new option that we have. A lot of people are starting to leverage that. And you can also talk, I had mentioned it before, but you can also do an update. So if you have a pre-existing record that's in the ServiceNow table that you're looking at, you can actually do an update and replace values with variables that you can pull from the jobs over. So that's basically the quick 1,000-foot view of actions. One thing I did want to talk a little bit about, it was actually something that came up a couple of days ago. I was having a conversation with a customer before, which is they were asking about file events versus file dependencies and when it's beneficial to use one or another. In their particular setup, they actually had a very, very complex set of steps that they were going through, when in reality they could have utilized the file event and probably cut out about 3 or 4 steps. So a file event is going to monitor a particular directory for a specified file. We know that. Then it's going to execute a corresponding action once that file is available. Whereas a file dependency is going to be tied to a specific job or job group and will only allow the job to execute once that file dependency has been met. So how does that actually translate, right? How does that actually work for us in a real world scenario? So if you know the day when the file is going to be present, for example, let's say every Friday, then you can schedule the job using a file dependency. The nice thing about that is that when you do it like that, you actually have the option to utilize that SLA option as well for the job, meaning that, you know, if the job goes beyond or has the risk of having its SLA breached, then you can set up a corresponding alert or email notification. However, if you don't know when the file is going to become available, then you can always just use a file event. And the benefit there is that it's going to prevent an oversaturation of jobs in your schedule that, you know, may potentially never run or have to be carried over. So doing it with the file event, basically, it's going to say, you know, it's going to help reduce your overhead, your resource overhead, and it's going to keep your day-to-day job activity schedule from getting so clustered with a bunch of jobs that may or may not necessarily need to run on that particular day. So file events versus file dependencies, it's kind of a tricky gray area, but there are times when you should use one versus the other. So that actually segues kind of nicely into the final topic, which is compound dependencies. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with the concept of dependencies, and I actually have my examples here. So with compound dependency, it's basically a combination of two or more dependencies being satiated, but not necessarily in any kind of order. Think of a compound dependency as basically it's a Boolean expression that's a combination of dependencies on a job. What happens is each dependency is assigned an index value, and once that set of values is satisfied, then the dependencies are marked as complete in the job and go ahead and do whatever it needs to do. So let's take a look at that real quick. So going over to my dependencies tab, so you can see that I have a total of 4 dependencies associated with it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be just job dependencies. Anything, you know, it can be a file dependency, it could be a variable dependency, it could be a job dependency. Each dependency that we have listed here has an index value assigned to it. So, you know, compound dependencies, job 1 has an index value of 1, job 2 has an index value of 2, and so forth and so on. Now, as far as our dependencies are set, we can either specify at the dependency level that all must be met, meaning that every single dependency must be satiated before the job executes, or at least one's got to be met. Or in this particular scenario, we're going to say it's going to be a compound. So that means we're either going to use 1 and 3, meaning jobs 1 and 3 must be satisfied in order for this particular job to execute, or 2 and 4. So let's go ahead and give a quick demonstration of this. I'm going to insert this entire group into my schedule. All right, so there's my compound dependencies group. Go ahead and refresh this. We can see that jobs 1 through 4 that have the corresponding index value of 1 through 4 are already launched and active. And we can kind of see here how this is going to play out. So it looks like maybe, I'm guessing 2 and 4 will probably complete fairly quickly because they've only running a sleep job for 10 seconds. Job 1's got a value set of 200 seconds, so that's not going to be completing anytime soon. All right, so now we have jobs 2 and 4, which have completed normally, thus satiating our compound dependencies job example, which is now active. And we can actually come over here to our dependencies tab, and we can see that, again, jobs 2 and 4 have completed normally. Job 1 is still currently active, and job 3, it looks like, completed abnormally. So basically, we can leverage this option when we have a series of job dependencies that perhaps just a combination of job dependencies need to be satiated in order for it to move to this next step. So that pretty much wraps up our tips and tricks webinar for today. I definitely want to encourage everybody to go out to the portal. Like I said, this will be posted to our web page, our customer portal for review and download and review. And then, if you go out there, please feel free to check out. We have a whole section on tips and tricks and techniques that may be beneficial. So I want to thank everybody for their time, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. And thanks again.
All right. Well, you're not done yet, so we'll get to Q&A here in a second. But before we do that, just a couple pieces of news. I don't know if you can advance here. There we go. All right, so first off, we've had a number of new clients that have joined us, joined the Tidal family here in the last couple of months. So I just wanted to take a quick second to welcome you all. Looks like a couple of you at least have joined us today. So welcome to the family. We look forward to working with you going forward. So next slide. So as many of you know, we've put a great deal of work into our SAP coverage recently. So in addition to going through, extensive certifications with SAP on our ABAP and our HANA adapters, we've also developed a number of new adapters. So you'll see some of them listed on the right there. And so we're going to be offering through the end of July, basically promotion for all of our SAP content. And we really feel that now we have the most comprehensive SAP offering on the workload automation market. So if you'd like to take advantage, we are going to be offering 50% off on all of these adapters. So if you want to take a closer look at them, get a license key to test them out, see a demo, anything like that, reach out to your account manager, or if you just like a quote, and we can take care of that for you. Next slide. So we've got a new white paper out. You can find it on the website, on the portal, comparing Tidal to Autosys. So we've got a number of new customers that have joined us from the Autosys world, and we're in the process of converting several of our existing clients who run multiple schedulers over from Autosys to Tidal. So this document compares the two, why you would want to make a move. We've developed a conversion utility to make the process easy. So if you're interested, feel free to go out, download the white paper, talk to your account manager, and we can go into more detail on what that process looks like and how we do it. Next slide. So we are continuing to host our virtual user group meetings. So we had one in the South earlier this week. I think we did one in the Northeast last week. There's a few upcoming that you can see here. So if you'd like to attend, please reach out to your account manager once again, and we can get you all the necessary information and get you registered. And then lastly, our next webinar is going to be on Thursday, July 22nd. And in that meeting, Tom O'Rourke will provide a preview of our summer launch. So he'll go through the new features, the enhancements, the new adapters, et cetera. So invites will be going out prior, but just wanted to make you all aware of it and get it on your calendar in advance. So, and now on to the Q&A. So we've got a number of questions here, Eric. So I'm just going to start at the top and kind of go through. We'll get as many as we can. And as we've said before, guys, if we don't get to all your questions, the answers will be posted on the portal along with this recording as well. So I'm just going to start reading. So on job events, am I correct in saying that, if there are multiple events, they're not sequential? So, if a job, he wants a job to auto rerun 5 times if it fails. If it continues to fail after the 5 reruns, I want to send an email, but not on every failure.
Yeah, okay, so let me repeat the question to make sure that I understand. So you have the rerun situation, right? So the job's going to continue to rerun, and then he wants an email notification to be sent if after the 5 reruns it still encounters a problem. Is that
correct? Not on everyone, but just after the 5.
Yeah. So just to give a little input. So right now we currently, it can be done, but it's not a simplistic way to go about doing it. So what you need to do is basically for each of those reruns, you have it update a variable. And then once that variable, so you'd use a combination of job event and variable event. And so once that variable, say, hit 5, then it would trigger the email that this job is completed abnormal and has reran 5 times. We do have an enhancement request in to see about making that a simpler way of having it all in one option. But right now, the way to currently do it is using a combination of a job event and a variable event and tying those together. And this is Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. All right.
Thanks, Ken.
Can we get a system event notification that lost connections to either agents or adapters have been restored?
Let's see. I don't think that we actually have the restoral option yet.
That's correct. We do not yet. That is, so that has been an enhancement that a number of customers have recently asked for. And so we have that on the list of one of the items to add in a up and coming release. So
okay.
Good question and good feedback. Thank you.
Here's another one. There's actually a number of them about plans, right? So are there any plans for file event operations to do a copy?
So just to understand the use case, so you want it to, when it triggers, to leave the file where it's at, but to copy it to a different location, or what? I'm just trying to understand the exact use case around that.
Yeah, I can't answer that one for you. Sorry.
Okay.
Let's see if they come into that one later.
Yeah, we can
right
get some more details on that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
okay.
the way I would do it, I was just going to say real quick, Rick, the way I would do it right now is if you're wanting to do that, would be to have the event trigger and then have it kick off a job that actually copies it. But definitely would like more information around the use case. So if you can give us your info, we'll reach out to you. Sorry, Rick, go ahead.
No, perfect. Can a file event be configured to view a share or VIP location on the network?
Yes, as long as the agent has connectivity out to that environment, then you can use a file event to trigger off of that. The key thing to keep in mind is that whatever account the agent is running with, that account has to have access and permissions to that location.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a little longer one here. So we see conditions where file events sometimes suspend on an agent, usually because a file exists in the target folder. The file event status in the console remains active, though. Is there any other way in Tidal to monitor for this condition? I had to set up a monitor for this agent logs using external monitoring tools to identify this condition.
Yes, so with the newer agent, we've recently added some additional parameters that you can configure in the agent. And so you can have the agent do a couple of things. So if the file, say, already exists, you can have the agent take and rename that file and put the date on there, or you can have a notification that, hey, this file already exists. So there's, we can send you some information, but it's part of the new agent, and you just configure that through the T-Agent INI.
Thank you. Can data from the MS SQL event be passed through to the alert?
You can do that, yes.
Okay. Could we have detail of the change in a table? So job name, detail of change, who made the change?
I'll have to, I believe we can do that, but I need to double check. I believe that's, but basically we should be able to pull that information based off of who, the user, the ID that was logged in and made the change. But I just need to double check.
Okay, thank you. How do you assign the ServiceNow incident to a specific person?
Oh, that's actually, when you set up the action itself, that's a incident table, or that's an option in the during the create portion of it, and you can actually specify if the user exists within Tidal, you can actually use it as a variable. If not, you can just type in that user's name into the action, and it'll automatically get assigned to that particular user.
Excellent, thank you. If an action fails, say a web service action gets back a 400, can that be monitored within Tidal, or do we have to monitor the web service adapter log file?
So let me see if I understand the question correctly. So if if a web service action is kicked off and that gets errors out with an error of 400, the question is can that be monitored?
Correct.
And I say yes. What you would have to do is in the, so it would actually be a web service job, and in the job events, there is a error code section or exit code section, And so you could go in there and you could have it monitor for the particular error code or the exit code. And then once that happens, then trigger based off of that.
Okay. For the file events, how often does the scheduler, oh, my thing just updated and moved away from the question. Sorry about that. For the file event, how often does the scheduler check for existence of the file? How many milliseconds?
Yeah, so the way that it currently works is that the checking for the files is single threaded. So if you had, say, 5 file events set up, typically, and this is configurable, so you can change this, but by default, we would go through the list of files to check for. Once we finish that, we would wait 20 seconds and then start that process over. But you can configure that to be, you know, quicker or longer if need be.
Perfect. Thank you. In past builds of Tidal, we had to fail over the master to force the master to accept the new value for the variable. Is that still true today?
No. So on one of the screens that Eric was showing, so when you set up a file event, there's an option that says, do you want to notify the agent if the variable value changes? So that there's an option that you can check. So when the variable gets updated, the master will realize that. Thank you, Eric. It's the evaluate, monitor on variable updates. So with that checked, each time the variable gets updated, the master will take and send out the change to the agent.
Perfect.
And it will monitor for that new value.
Excellent. Okay. Can file events alert if a file doesn't arrive?
So that's you know, so with the file events, you know, typically, and this kind of gets into what Eric was talking about with using an event. So if you know that a file should arrive on a particular day, then it's better to use a dependency, because then you can tie in the SLA, or you can tie in, you know, job alerts that, hey, this job hasn't kicked off. But with a file event, the whole thing or thing behind it is that you don't know when that file is going to show up. And so you might know that file is going to show up, you know, sometime between Monday and Friday. And so as Eric was saying, you know, you'd want to use the schedule so that you're not looking on Saturday and Sunday. But the whole thing is since we don't know when it's going to show, we can't trigger. So if you know when it's going to happen or when it's going to show up, and that it should show up every Thursday, then it's better to use the a file dependency, and you can then trigger off of that.
Perfect. Thank you. There's a question about, do you have plans to develop tools to migrate from Control-M or TWS to Tidal as well as Autosys? And I'll take that. There is. So we've actually done successful migrations, both of those in Control-M fairly recently. We've done a couple of them, but we don't have a utility yet. And the only one we have is for Autosys, but we do have conversion methodologies that can successfully do it. And we are looking into possibly developing them as they become more and more you know, important, right? We're having more and more customers coming over to us for that. So I do think that is something that's in our plans here for the future. Let's see, will there be a filter button created in the job event area so you can find events easier? And I think earlier there was another question about a filter to search for an action to assign to events as well. So 2 different questions, but kind of the same thing, I think.
Yeah, so for the filtering for job events, you can, let me double check one thing real quick, so I'm giving the right answer here. But if I recall correctly, and I'm trying to do this off of memory because I don't have it up in front of me right now, but in the top right-hand corner, I think there is the filter where you can key in. Hey, Eric, can you bring up the screen for events? Yes. So over in the top right-hand side there, you could enter in the event that you're looking for, the name of it. You can also sort off the various columns there. So if you know who it's owned by, you can sort by owner, or you can sort by name.
Perfect, thank you. So we have reached the top of the hour. I apologize, there's a lot of questions here, so we will get them all answered, as I said, and posted on the portal. But I am going to wrap it up now. So thank you everyone for attending. Eric, thank you very much for a great presentation, really appreciate it. Thank you, Ken, for all your feedback here on the Q&A. And thank you all for joining. Have a great day, great rest of your week, and we'll talk with you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank y'all for joining.